So I will start. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you're tuning in. Welcome to another climate talk by the Porto Protocol, this time on calculating the water footprint of wine. If you have been following our work, you've probably noticed that water has been a recurring topic lately. That's because we are preparing a comprehensive report on water and wine to be published next year. So, trying to gather these all different perspectives from academia, as we have today, to producers that we bring on board as well, is for us essential to ensure that this report will reflect not only the most updated knowledge but the most accurate data and inspiring, of course, case studies from all over the world that can change and drive change in the wine sector when it comes to managing water. But before I begin, I would like also to take this opportunity to briefly introduce the Porto Protocol for us, for the ones that still not know us, and invite, of course, everyone that is watching to join our community. We are a global wine network and knowledge hub that catalyzes climate action by sharing practical solutions across the entire value chain. Today, we count over 250 members from 21 countries and 5 continents, all working together to move climate action forward. From soil to sip, we explore ways of not only enhancing biodiversity, conserve water, reduce waste, and improving packaging, and of course, adopt more sustainable practices across the industry. Today, our focus will be on measuring the water footprint and how this can become a catalyst for resilience, innovation, and collective steward in the wine industry. I'm thrilled to have this amazing panel with us. Our guests, thank you, all of you. So Keys, Lucrecia, Valentina, and of course Gianni, that will be moderating today's discussion, and that is also leading our upcoming report that I've told you. So thank you all for accepting our invitation to join us today, and to our audience, thank you for joining us as well. Now, Jenny, I hand over to you. The floor is yours, and hopefully we will all learn together. Jenny.
Thank you so much, Marta. Can I get a thumbs up that my screen is sharing accurately at this moment?
Yes, perfectly well.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. Bem-vindos to today's Climate Talk, the Water Footprint series today entitled Calculating Water Footprint. So water is the invisible lifeblood of wine, shaping terroir, defining quality, and revealing the true cost of every drop we produce. Yet understanding our water footprint remains one of the most complex challenges for the wine sector today. While carbon footprint has become a common indicator across industry, water footprint is still emerging, yet essential to understand our true environmental impact. So today's roundtable brings together, as Christina has just introduced, the three leading voices in sustainability and viticulture. So we have Dr. Kees van Leeuwen from Bordeaux Sciences Agro, Dr. Lucrezia Lamastra of Università Católica del Sacro Cuore, and Valentina Lira of Vinha Concho y Toro. So the discussion will unpack the science, the methodologies, and practical implications of assessing water use across the value chain. Okay, I'm Jehani Brecci, your host for today's Climate Talk, owner and operator of Stella Pietro Vineyards, located in southeastern Brazil. Probably one of the few places in the world where you see dry farmed Vitis vinifera and Arabica coffee varietals thrive side by side. Before we get into introductions from each or presentations from each of our panelists, I'd like to welcome our guests to actively participate in today's discussion by submitting your questions, comments, and reactions in the chat box or the Q&A box if you prefer. We will do our best to weave them into the discussion whenever possible, and time allowing, we will address them at the end of the talk. So once again, thank you all for your presence, and let's get started here with Dr. Kees. Kees, would you be able to share here with our audience today a brief overview of how your extensive academic and professional endeavors have contributed to advancing our understanding of the complex relationship between water dynamics and terroir expression.
Yeah, thank you, Gianni. So water is a very important component of terroir expression. So I've been working on water relations in vines ever since I started to study terroir. But water is also a very important aspect of sustainability and maybe a little bit underestimated because there have been much more works published on, as you say, on carbon footprint, but also on biodiversity, which are also important components of biodiversity. But water is really something we need to work on to reduce the water footprint of the wine industry for a better sustainability.
Thank you, Kees. Now on to Dr. Lamastra. Could you share with our audience how your work at the university and your involvement at Viva Sustainability Wine Program, amongst others, has contributed to advancing the assessment and practical application of water footprint methodologies within the wine sector?
Hi, Gianni, and hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm very happy also because I worked a lot with the water footprint since 2011, also in my research activity and into the framework of the Viva program, that is the Italian program for the sustainability of wine, funded some years ago by the Italian Ministry for the Environment. And I think that one of the most important things, adding someone to the opinion of Professor Keys, is that one indicator is not enough to measure sustainability. And if we are here to share our knowledge about sustainability, we need to be aware that we need a lot of indicators, and we cannot just focus into the carbon footprint, but we have also water footprint and other indicators. And so, considering the importance of the water that is renewable, but at the same time is limited and can be degraded, it is important to have instruments and tools to measure our impact into this important resource.
Thank you. And last, Ms. Lira, could you please share with the audience how your leadership at Concha y Toro has shaped the company's approach to water stewardship and sustainability, and how your experience has informed the integration of water footprint assessment into the broader strategy of environmental management across the winery's operations?
Okay. Good morning or good afternoon, whenever you are. Viña Concha y Toro has very comprehensive sustainability strategies in many, many years. And as Lamastra said, we are not only considering one topic or another, but a full set of different indicators in which water footprint and water consumption are part of it. We think really that water is a key resource that we need to produce quality wine and sustainable wines. So that's why it's something that we work very intensively. It's something that we start to use since the very beginning of the water footprint methodology. We were the first winery in the world to use this methodology in the very beginning. So we have learned together with the methodology in order to, how to use it, how to make the correct interpretation of this indicator and the places or the processes in which we can use it. So we're very excited to be here and share this conversation with you.
Thank you, Valentina. Thank you. So perhaps we can start and already get a little technical here with our answers, given that most of you have already expressed the importance of this metric for our industry. And I'd like to propose that we start by defining a little bit better the concept of water footprint. There seems to be often confusion between the concept of water use, water efficiency, but what is water footprint? Is water footprint the equivalent to water withdrawal, or is it about water consumption? Can it capture water pollution? So perhaps if Dr. Van Leeuwen felt comfortable, would you be willing to tackle this question first and start unpacking what we mean by water footprint. And yes, please feel free to share screen as you see fit.
Okay, thank you, Gianni. So happy to start the introduction before the next two speakers. First, just one slide on the impact of water deficit on vine physiology. So vines are one of the rare crops which are very commonly cultivated under water deficit. So a restriction of the water uptake of the vine has a certain number of implications on the physiology of the vine. So the first physiological effect of water deficit is that shoots stop growing when vines meet water deficit. Berry growth is also restricted, and this results in smaller berries at the time of harvest. But regarding quality parameters, water deficit actually has favorable effects on the composition of grapes, and water deficit in particular triggers the synthesis of anthocyanins in grape skins, which is particularly important for red wine quality. But more recently, research has shown that aromas are also improved when vines are grown under water deficit, and this is true for red wine, but also for white wine, although we consider that the ideal water deficit for white wine production is a little bit lower than the ideal water deficit for red wine production. Of course, water deficit decreases yields. When berries are smaller, the yields are lower. So this has also an impact on the profitability of the wine production. So producing good wine at a reasonable yield is all about finding the right level of water deficit. But this slide is important because we should not be afraid of water deficit. Of course, we don't want severe stress, but vines, if you want to produce quality wines, you need to grow your vines under water deficit. Now, about the water footprint of wine in wine grape production. So water footprint is the amount of water necessary to produce 1 unit of product. So it can be applied to any product and also to agricultural products. So in our case, the number of liters of water to produce a bottle of wine. And it's important because, of course, fresh water is an increasingly scarce resource. So if you compute your water footprint, that's a metric, and so you can only try to reduce your water footprint if you know your water footprint. The concept is relatively recent and was first introduced by a researcher named Arjen Hoekstra, who introduced this concept only in 2002, so it's less than 25 years old. And unfortunately, Arjen Hoekstra passed away at a very young age, but there's an increasing community of researchers working on the concept today. So there's a lot of articles published. So Hoekstra defined, according to its origin, different types of water. So green water is water coming from the rain, and which is stored in the root zone of the soil and used by the plants. Blue water is water that is sourced from groundwater or aquifers. Gray water is about polluted water. And it's in fact the amount of water that you need to dilute polluted water to recover the local environmental standards. For instance, if you release 1 liter of water that contains 100 times more nitrates than the local water standards, then you need to dilute that liter of water by 100 liter to recover the local water standards. Of course, green, blue, and gray water do not have the same environmental impact. Several methods have been developed to calculate water footprint, but there's not yet a universally accepted consensus methodology to calculate a water footprint in wine grape production. And in fact, in the literature, there's a quite fierce controversy about the different methods. So there are different types of methodologies to calculate water footprint. So here just some extracts from publications in which the different researchers across publications argue with each other about the strong points and the weak points of the different approaches. And so there are different approaches, and to put it in a very short way, there's a community which was established by Arjen Hoekstra, which is the Water Footprint Network, which has a certain approach, and another type of approach which was established by the Life Cycle Assessment community. So, as I said before, it's important to calculate the water footprint because you need to know your water footprint if you want to reduce it. And I think it can also be an interesting way to communicate with consumers. And I think it can be interesting that the consumers know the water footprint of the wine which is produced. We know, for instance, in the Nutri-Score that the agro-industry tries to change the recipe of different food products to improve their Nutri-Score because they know that their product sells better if the Nutri-Score is better. And we can imagine something similar with the water footprint. Now, there is not yet consensus water footprint calculation in wine grape production, but there's work in progress on this topic under the auspices of the OIV. Just to give you some orders of magnitude of blue water footprint, in the cellar, the blue water footprint is between 1 and 10 liters per bottle of wine. In a dry farm vineyard, it's basically mainly the water which is used for the spraying of pesticides, which is about 1 liter per bottle. And in an irrigated vineyard, the amount of blue water is much more substantial and ranging between 100 and 500 liters per bottle. So we see that irrigation has a big impact on the water footprint. So, final slide, how can we possibly reduce the water footprint of wine grape production? Well, all the levers that makes the vineyard more resilient to water stress can reduce the water footprint because it can help either to maintain dry farming or help to reduce the amount of irrigation water which is used. So the use of drought-resistant rootstock is a very efficient way to reduce your water footprint. Also promoting deep rooting, because if the vines have deeper rooting, then they have access to a greater reservoir of water in the soil that increases the water holding capacity of the soil that can be used by the vines over the season, and it makes that the vines use more green water because in that compartment rainwater is stored, and then you have less need to use blue water for irrigation. The variety is also very, very important, and unfortunately, recently international varieties have become very popular, and most of the international varieties like Merlot and Tempranillo and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are very vulnerable to drought. And we should definitely need to promote drought-resistant varieties like Grenache or Carignan in dry areas because they use much less water. And also, we need to promote drought-resistant training systems. Like, for instance, the Mediterranean Gobelet training system is very, very resistant to drought and can be possibly dry farmed even in dry climates. So there is, of course, a mechanization. The Gobelet, often growers say, yeah, we cannot maintain the Gobelet because we cannot harvest it by the machine, but we should adapt the mechanization to drought-resilient training system. And so this can help to either maintain dry farming wherever it is possible or reduce the amount of irrigation water if irrigation is mandatory in very dry climates. So this was my general introduction, and now I'm happy to leave the floor to the other people who are really daily, either like Lucrezia, who is researcher working on a specific methodology in water footprint, and Valentina, who's actually using it in an operational winery.
Thank you so much, Dr. Van Leeuwen. One of the key challenges that you bring up in your introduction is, applying water footprint as an indicator. There are multiple ways to do it. So we have this methodological question, and perhaps, Dr. Lamastra, you could take a segue here and share with our audience how you use water footprint calculations for the VIVA program, amongst others, and what has been your methodological approach?
Yes, thank you, Gianni, and thank you, Keith, for your very comprehensive and clear introduction about the topic of the water footprint. What I can add is just to share with you our experience into the Viva program. Viva started 15 years ago as a program in which we developed the 4 indicators to measure sustainability, because as I mentioned before, we recognized that one indicator is not enough. And so we started from the carbon footprint, that is the most common used indicator, but we added also the water footprint. At that time, we used the indicator as presented by KISS, so the one developed by Professor Extra and supported by the Water Footprint Network, in which 3 different colors of water, as explained by KISS, can be evaluated, and the sustainability is based considering the value, the volumes obtained from these 3 different kinds of water. But if we consider also the numbers provided by KISS, for instance, he mentioned into the winery, usually from 1 to 10 liters of water are used. This is part of the blue water footprint following this methodology, the one provided by the Water Footprint Network, but following a life cycle assessment approach, this is just an inventory data, is a volume. You are just measuring the amount of water consuming in doing an operation, for instance, in producing wine into a cellar. So in 2014, the ISO standard has been released. In this standard, water footprint is calculated into the field of the life cycle assessment. And so not also the approach of the water footprint is following the life cycle stage of the wine production. So starting from the vineyard and arriving to the wine consumption. But what is different now is that 1 liter of water is not always 1 liter of water, because the weight, the impact we attribute to 1 liter of water can be different considering the position in which water is used. So as you can see here in this picture, you can see the word in several colors. Why? Because in each one of the country, we have a different water availability and a different competition for the use of water. Therefore, the consumption of 1 liter of water can have a different impact. This is the difference between the 2 approaches. One is volumetric. We measure the amount of water used, or better, consumed, because the water that is sourced but is to be taken into consideration must be really consumed, not just taken from our water body. But in this case, in the case in which we apply the ISO standard, we have to transform the water consumption into water impact, introducing a characterization factor. And this characterization factor is related to the position in which water is sourced. So considering the water availability and also the competition for the use of water. So, for instance, this is just an example about Italy. The consumption of 1 liter of water can have a completely different impact. If you look at the Aosta Valley, from which I'm from, 1 liter of water is corresponding to 2.70 liter of water transformed into an impact, because the Aosta Valley is to the north of the Italy, in the middle of the Alps, is very rich of water. If we look to, I don't know, Sicily or Sardinia, that are in the south of Italy, poor of water, with an high competition for the water, the characterization factor is really high. So this means that 1 liter of water consumed in Sardinia is equivalent to 81 liter, while 1 liter of water consumed into the Aosta Valley corresponds to just 2.70 liter of water consumed. So at the start with the Viva program, we developed the indicator following the water footprint network and having the 3 colors of water. In 2019, 5 years later, the release of the ISO standard, we moved to this approach. So just to show you, but we can also see the results after. This is the same company before and after. Of course, we have an improvement also due to the awareness the company obtained during the years. So as Kim mentioned before, the tool is important not because we would like to know how much water we are consuming, but because we need to know how much water we are consuming and where in order to improve, in order to reduce our impact. So before you can see the 3 different colors, but after following the new approach, you can see 2 indicators. One that is based into the water scarcity. So following the methodology, aware, that is one of the methodology we have, and this is the problem that Keith mentioned before. At the moment, there is no scientific consensus. We have several methodologies to calculate the water footprint, and this is a huge problem because the scale is completely different. Sometimes can be liter of water and sometimes square meter of water, depending on the methodology. So it's very difficult to find the way to compare results obtained with different methodologies. In this case, we applied AWARE. AWARE is the methodology developed by the VULCA. VULCA is a working group of the CETAC, so it's very important, but it's not the only one. And we obtained 3 liters of water equivalent due to the irrigation and no water impact as obtained after the vineyard management, and so due to the application of fertilizers and pesticides. So at the moment we have 2 different ways to measure the water impact. One is based into the direct water scarcity footprint, so based into the competition and the availability for the water in a certain region, and the other one is the non-comprehensive water degradation footprint, in which we use the gray water footprint concept, and so we calculate the virtual water amount we need to dilute pollutant. So we evolve over time. We started with a methodology, and 5 years ago we moved to another one. Results are not comparable because the approach is completely different. I cannot say this is better than this one. We made this change just because we would like to be ISO compliant. This is the only reason for which we move from one methodology to another one.
Thank you, Dr. Lamastra. This has been fascinating to see the evolution as well of certain methodologies available to us and the incentives for the usage of one versus another. Ms. Lira, at Concha y Toro, does your team follow strictly a single methodology? How do you navigate this landscape for accounting Concha y Toro's multiple vineyards water footprint? What is your approach?
Okay.
I think
Yes. Thank you, Gianni. Okay, so our approach can be maybe summarized. Here, I brought some slides that I want to show you in order to have a better understanding on that. Okay, so okay, so for us, Viña Concha y Toro, as I was saying in the beginning, water is the key resource that we need in order to produce the best quality wines, and also to be sure that we are going to have the amount of, or the volume that we need in order to produce the amount of wine that we need. Okay, so all of the different topics that we address in the company regarding sustainability are summarized in our sustainability strategy that is Uncork a Better Future. And we have a special program regarding water, which is the program Zero Waste of Water, in which we collect different initiatives and actions that we put in place with the different partners, okay, regarding all of them regarding water. And as a company, we also have the commitment to reduce the amount of water that we are using per bottle, okay? So the 2025 goal is to reduce 10% in the water consumption per bottle of wine. But we use the concept here of water consumption, as you can see. And we have a baseline. And again, we use the methodology of the water footprint network in order to have also a complementary indicator, because we know that water consumption is only, it gives you only one view of the topic, but not a total or comprehensive view of how are you going to manage the water in the different, and also in the different origins. Viña Contraitoro is a holding of different vineyards that is present not only here in Chile, but also in Argentina, also in the United States. Okay, so in this graph that I'm showing here, you can see the water consumption that we have had during the last 5 years. Okay, so what we can see here is that we are using more water, increasing the amount of water over time, because we as a company are growing. And so the use of water will continue growing for a little while. But also, when we look at the numbers per hectare, we can see that the amount of water it will continue growing. And that is because we are facing right now here in Chile, also in Argentina, and also in the US, we are facing, a scenario of water scarcity during the last years. And that's why we can see that this challenge that we have regarding water management is not only something that we are facing here, but also in Argentina and the US. And as Keith was saying in the beginning, you need to know your water consumption if you want to, take measures or take action in order to reduce that. So we know as well, we also do the analysis regarding what is the amount of water that we take from the surface or the underground. And as you can see, we have different conditions, but here in Chile, which are the first two bars, it's mainly 2/3 of the water that we take from the surface or in the ground or the ground level. But the two of those sources are receiving the impact of the climate stress that we are facing at the global scale. And so another indicator that we have that we need to monitor is also the water stress areas in which we produce. Because this is something that we need to consider if we are going to do a very comprehensive water management, in order to decide what are the places in which I need to irrigate more, or what are the other places in which maybe I can trust a little more about the rainfalls and other sources of water. So we need to, when we do the irrigation management in the agricultural department, all these different variables is something that you have to continue in order to have a very holistic kind of irrigation program. It's not something you cannot consider only one variable, okay? And plus, as I was saying, also some other indicator that we use is the water footprint concept that we use in order to complement the view, because we know that water consumption is something that we can, in a way, manage, but the plants or the bites are going to have some other uses or are going to have another sources. And when we have some operations in cellars or bottling plants, we also generate an impact on water as well. So we need to consider all that. And that's why we decided to use the water footprint as a complementary indicator in order to be able to see some of the things and not only see the impact in water consumption, but have this complementary impact that you have in the ecosystem by knowing the green footprint or the negative impact more linked to the gray footprint, okay, or the kind of the gray water footprint. So what you can see here is that during 2023, which is the last measurement that we had, is the water footprint was 63 liters of water per glass of wine, which is almost 380 liters per bottle of wine, which is for us is considered a very good number. If we take the international benchmark that is today displayed displayed by the Water Footprint Network, which is 109 liters of water per glass of wine. So it's very significantly lower than the average of the wine industry. That is the benchmark number that today is displayed by the organization. Mainly, but something that I want you to notice is that in our case, 50% of the water footprint is coming from the blue water, which is totally different of the number that Lucrecia was presenting before, because she was presenting a number from the Frisante, which was almost 490, but almost 100%. It was 99.6% coming from green water. So here we are able to see how different water management can affect, the composition of your water footprint. And also in our case, 99% is the indirect use of water and not the direct water coming from the operations, cellars, and everything. In our case, it's irrigation, is the operational use of water. Indirect use of water, which is our own crops, but also the water that is coming in the grapes that we purchase, because we also consider the value chain when we measure the carbon footprint of the company. So this is an indicator that we really use to analyze the composition or the different usage of the water that we are having in the process that we have as a company. And also is very, I add this slide because I thought it would be interesting for you to know the evolution over time. So, and I'm going to use this because I think one of the main problems that we see, because if you receive very good information from the water footprint, but I would say that the main problem or disadvantage is that there is a lot of things or the component, like the blue and the gray, is something that you can manage inside your company in order, if you want to reduce, is something that you can, control in a way. But the blue water is something that sometimes is difficult because it's not something that you can manage in a very, I would say, detailed way, something that you just receive. And for a company, it's very difficult to manage or to reduce, to take action. And that's why we think this is a very complementary view. It's not the only indicator that we need to take a look at, but we need to monitor because it provides us different information. And also, the water footprint is an indicator that is very depending on the, climate conditions for a specific year. So that's why for companies, it's difficult to have something like that because you cannot manage. You cannot, if you want to move it, if you want to reduce it, it's not something that you can do using your own tools. You depend on the tools from the outside. So that's why it's something that for us is a complementary view. And we are very happy to have it because it's giving us additional information to the operational information that we already have as a regular indicator or KPI for the internal water management. Okay, so, and I was saying this is not the only one because today, not only the company or other vineyards or your consumers or your clients are the ones that are looking at this kind of information or your performance regarding water management. There's a different aspects regarding water that you need to consider if you're going to have a very comprehensive water management as a company. Today, for instance, this is the example of all the different topics that regarding water management, the sustainability, the Dow Jones Best in Class Index is today taken a look at. And as you can see, water risk management programs and the water stress areas that I show you in the beginning are very important indicators, just like water consumption is something that you need to consider in your internal management. And also the CDP is looking at these dimensions. And as you can see, commitment to public policy, for instance, is also a very important part of the management that you have to do regarding water and how are you making your value chain to participate also, not only in measuring, but reducing the water consumption and lowering the impact of your water usage in the process that you have as a winemaker. So there are different indicators that we need to use. They need to be complementary and they need to be aligned with the goal that you have as a company. And I think that's the main message. For us, the water footprint is an indicator that helps us to lower the impact in the different places that we are. So, and this is the QR. You can have more information there because we have the different reports regarding the topic. But I am more than happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Lyria. So this is an admirable public commitment to water stewardship and sustainability, as Lyndon Johnson-Bell commented here in our chat. And I'll take this opportunity to follow up with a question from Linda that perhaps you could address. She says, given that Concha and Toro's vineyards are reportedly around 80% or more irrigated, how does the company reconcile this level of water stewardship and sustainability? Are there plans, for example, in addition to the dry farming pilot projects in Itata and Biobío, to transition toward a dry farming or reduced irrigations in certain regions? In other words, how are we turning this data into action? What are the actions perhaps that Concha and Toro has, mapped out or already put in action, since this analysis has been conducted?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Linda, for your question. Water is a big challenge for us, but we need water. Okay. So for here, and here, I mean, the company is not 80%, but 100% of irrigation, deep irrigation system we have. And that is because what we need to do is to do a responsible irrigation. We need to have a responsible irrigation system. Okay. So, and this is something that today we're using the more advanced, I would say, irrigation system for vineyards. But the challenge is how do we move or what is the next step? And that's why this challenge is being addressed by our Center of Research and Development. working in specific technologies in order to continue reducing the water usage. And we are working in two parallel action lines or action works or lines of action. Okay, the first one is how to make the irrigation system more efficient, and that is more like a technological kind of challenge. And the other one is it's how do we select the correct plants for the correct areas and for the correct soils, and in order to have plants that are more adapted to the new conditions that we have in the different areas. Because here in Chile, we are in a Mediterranean climate here in the middle of the country, in which all the vineyards are, not only Conchaitor. And that's why the challenge is to have the correct pairs, have the correct plants for the correct region, and introduce more technology and predictive models in order to make the irrigation system more efficient than the one that we have today. But it's a long-term kind of challenge, very technological, with a lot of innovation, and huge for the country.
I'll let Dr. Van Leeuwen react to Valentina's statement. Yes, please.
Yeah, Valentina, so very interesting. Of course, there's a possibility to have technological progress in the way that you manage irrigation, but we also know that there are big differences in the vulnerability of different varieties towards drought.
Yes.
And here the consumers come on board because, for instance, Merlot is a very drought vulnerable variety for which you need much more water than, for instance, for a variety like Grenache or Carignan or even Cabernet Sauvignon. So how can we get the consumers on board? Because if a consumer buys a bottle of Grenache, probably you need twice less irrigation to produce a bottle of Grenache than to produce a bottle of Merlot. So how can we make the consumers aware that by choosing the variety, they can have an impact on the water footprint? I know it's not easy to get the consumers on board, but I think there's definitely a role for the consumers.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a huge challenge, but I think it's something that all of the wineries need to do together, because if we are, selecting the correct, not the correct, but the proper varieties for the proper conditions, and not to make an additional stress for the, ecosystemic conditions, it will be more, it will have a less impact, not only on water, but on soils and biodiversity of the different areas. But I think this is something that is going to happen, because the climate will lead you to that. Because in some places, maybe in the future, it will be difficult to have, or you will have to make a double effort to have some varieties that are not well adapted to that area. And so this is I think what we are seeing. It's a transition period in which we are, accommodating or adapting wineries for the new conditions, or for the conditions of the future.
Last year, I was at Cal Poly in a university in Paso Robles. And Paso Robles, they have big problems with the availability of water. And they tested a variety called Petit Syrah or Durif, which is incredibly drought resistant. And they say in Paso Robles, we can possibly dry farm Durif. And they tested it and they proposed it to growers. But the growers said, yeah, we can possibly dry farm it, but we cannot sell it because all our consumers, they only want Cabernet Sauvignon. So I think this is a big issue. How can we get consumers on board so that they accept maybe to take into account in their varietal choice the water footprint of each variety? I know it's not easy, but
Yes, absolutely. It's not easy, but I think it's something that we all wineries need to, address together. And I think that's why it's so important to have, opportunities like this one, and where we can gather under the Porto Protocol invitation to start talking and to start discussing about this, because we need to, move us.
And I believe, Valentina, along those lines, and perhaps here I can pass on to Dr. Lamastra again to react, because my understanding is that the Viva program, in a way, is attempting to bring that level of awareness of not only the water footprint, but other indicators where water footprint is one of them, to the consumer, right? And to perhaps also try to bring this to the attention of the end buyer. We have here a conversation going on in the chat currently asking about, the morality of farming and producing in wine regions where water use is extractive. But, if there is ways to adapt and to transition the industry to a more sustainable fashion, and perhaps there are tools and, in place. And I don't know if Dr. Lamastra, if you think the Viva program is really going towards that direction with the certification process, if you could react a little bit towards this question and this conversation that's happening here in parallel in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Gianni, for giving me the opportunity to comment both the presentation of Valentina, but also what is happening into the chat. So about Valentina, when we have seen the results of Concha y Toro, we have seen completely different colors. This is why in Italy, PDO production cannot be irrigated. And so our production in Italy is maintained using the green water. That is, the green water is the part of water used by the plant provided naturally. So by the humidity, rain stored into the soil and used by the vineyard to do the evapotranspiration. So without having irrigation, we have a very little amount of blue water, and this is why the water footprint was completely green. I don't think this is important to understand the difference between the two metrics I showed before. Why? Because when you show a volume of blue water, is just a volume of blue water. But what is happening into the chat is there is someone asking, but it is sustainable to use water in countries in which water is not available to produce wine. How we can translate this impact? So using the different metrics, the one of the water footprint of the ISO standard, we can have this understanding, because the 1 liter of water in a region in which the water is scarce is more than 1 liter. So the 40 liters are not just 40 liters, can be a huge amount of water. And also at the start, I forgot to remember that why water footprint is so important due to the trade, because wine is something that is traded between countries. And together with the wine, we are trading also resources. And so it could be a problem the moment in which we are trading something from a country from which water is scarce, and we need a lot of water to produce it. So this is also the reason for which to be ISO compliant, we shift our methodology in order to translate this the indicator and having other information. I agree with Valentina that it's very difficult, and also because you cannot select the position in which you start producing wine, and you cannot manage the water scarcity completely. But at the same time, it's important because where we have not a lot of water, we have to be more aware about the impact our activity can have, also in competition with other activities. Into the Viva program, we tried also to answer to you, Gianni, to translate these concepts that are difficult to the consumers. And so you can see into our website, there is the link into the chat, how the results are shown to the consumers. And At the moment, we have not a lot of consumers that are selecting the more sustainable wine, of course, but at the same time, the Italian Ministry for the Environment is supporting this activity because it's important to share knowledge about environmental sustainability, and is a little step towards sustainability, but we need a little step to obtain also huge results. So this has been the approach since the start, to be transparent, to share results, to explain results, and to try to make consumer more aware about the environmental impact.
Thank you, Dr. Lamastra. We have a question here on the chat by Joaquim Miguel, and perhaps Dr. Van Leeuwen, you could address it. He's discussing the possibility to share views here about the usage of wastewater in viticulture as an alternative solution. Thank you, Dr. Van Leeuwen.
This is a very good question, because wastewater is very often presented as a sort of miracle solution for water scarcity, because people consider that treated wastewater is something like water that is lost anyway, and so it can be as a sort of recycled. That could be a good solution to address the question of water scarcity in agriculture. And some countries are very advanced in using treated wastewater, and probably the foremost example is Israel, where 80 or 90% of the wastewater is treated and used in agriculture. But we should be very careful with this solution, because on the first remark is that treated wastewater is not lost, because treated wastewater, if it is released in the environment, for instance, it helps to maintain minimal flows in rivers. So if you use it in agriculture again, then that treated wastewater will not go back to the environment. So it is, even if it is treated wastewater, it is somehow taken from the environment, because it's then not returned in the environment. And the second issue, which is maybe even a greater issue of treated wastewater, is that it is never totally pure water, because depending on the level of the treatment, it still contains salts and nitrogen, and so it contributes to building up salt in the soil. And for instance, in Israel, they have huge problems with salt building up in soils, making a lot of agricultural land almost impossible to use for vines, because vines are very sensitive to salt. And if you have salt in your soil, then, for instance, the microbiological life is very, very poor because salt is very harmful to the microorganisms in the soil. And so eventually the vines can even struggle to grow and have big salt stress issues. And if you have salt stress, the only solution is to use massive irrigation to push the salt away from the roots. So in a country like Israel, they need to use more and more water to irrigate just to push back the salt. So it's I don't believe this is a really very sustainable solution. It looks like a miracle solution, but in fact, I believe it is not.
Thank you, Dr. Van Leeuwen. So as we are nearing the end of our talk, perhaps I'll leave a last question that all of you could react to. If there's one takeaway for producers listening today, what would you like for them to remember? So maybe Valentina, I'll let you go first.
Okay, thank you, Johanny. I think that the main takeaway in my case, since we are, practitioners, is to say that water is a big challenge, and we need to take care of that resource. So please don't stay only with one view of the indicators or one view for the management. You need to complement your view with different indicators. And I think the water footprint, even when you have difficulties for prepare actions or what can I do, because sometimes it's not something that I can handle, it will provide you a very good look at the ecological or considering the ecological point of view, considering beyond your boundaries, the effect of the water usage that you are doing. So my message is complement always your view, because that will allow you to be a more responsible producer.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lira. Dr. Lamastra, what would be your final thoughts here?
I agree completely with Valentina, so I would like to remember that to understand what are the impacts of a product or of a production or of a service, we need to follow everything from the cradle to the grave and from a different perspective. So one perspective is not enough. We are speaking now about another perspective that could be environmental, the water footprint. So we are into the field of the environmental footprint, but we know also that to be sustainable, we have also to consider something else. So also the social and economic sustainability. So we have to have a wider perspective and seeing the sustainability from 360 degrees to do something of positive for the environment, for the society, for the future.
Thank you. And Dr. Van Leeuwen, any last words?
Yes, so when we look at the water footprint, it's clear that that irrigation can have a big impact on the water footprint, and it is not always possible to do without irrigation. For instance, if you are in Mendoza with 200 millimeters of rain a year, you have to irrigate. So in those situations, you should work on decreasing the amount of irrigation. But what we see today is that in many areas, in particular in Europe, where dry farming is possible, growers move to irrigation, and I think we should prevent them from moving to irrigation, because there is no better way to be responsible with water than to practice dry farming, and see that it's the next topic for the 6th November, and it's a very good topic. So where dry farming is possible, we should maintain dry farming.
Thank you, Dr. Van Leeuwen, for that plug-in for next week's climate talk. So as today's discussion comes to an end, we are reminded that the calculation of water footprint isn't just a scientific exercise. It's about valuing the resource that sustains our vines, our communities, and our future. So with that said, my sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists for their invaluable insights and for sharing their expertise in this vital conversation on the concept of water footprint today. To our audience, thank you for your engagement and thoughtful questions. We invite you to explore the Porto Protocol's extensive library of climate talks and resources where you can delve deeper into a wide range of topics. The platform offers you the ability to filter through contents, allowing you to easily access water-related materials and continue expanding your knowledge on this critical subject. We appreciate your participation and commitment to shaping a more sustainable future for viticulture. Until next time, take care and stay engaged. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.